Does anyone know? Control scroll wheel doesn't work. And this also isn't what we want to be looking at. So we're working with a slightly simplified version of Gwent here. When I'm talking about points and provisions, I mean them to be the same thing. I'm under the assumption that if you have 1 point in your deck, or 1 provision in your deck is worth 1 point. So a 4 provision card is generally going to be worth 4 points. A 6 provision card is going to be worth 6 points. I'm doing this because we don't have actual numbers for what the cards are going to be after Homecoming. We just have the numbers that look to be what they're trying to estimate. Make the spreadsheet font larger, zoom in. I'm literally holding Control scroll wheel and it will not zoom in. Control and plus. Control plus. There we go. Okay. Zoom out a little bit. How's this look? It's a lot of... Oh, there's a couple sheets. There's a couple sheets. So when you got 25 cards in deck with 165 provisions, the minimum card value, which is the cheapest provision cost you can put in your deck, is 4. Because we draw 16 cards per game, you have 9 cards left over by default, which means, okay. And then when we divide the 165 by the number of cards in their deck, the average points per card that you're going to have in your deck is 6.6. Because we have 9 leftover points, 9 leftover cards in our deck, we're going to, on average, be wasting about 60 points. Because we don't have any thinning. This is ignoring mulligans. We'll get into that later. It's just looking at the average. The minimum is just 4 times this 9, assuming you have all 4s left over in your deck, which is the most optimistic way you can look at it. Does this look wrong to anybody yet? Or any questions? Checks out. Okay. So now let's talk about mulligans a little bit. Where things get a little bit more complicated. So I wrote a mulligan simulator in Python over here. It draws hands, runs trials, gathers samples, blah, blah, blah. So we have a couple variables here. We have the deck, which is estimated here. So this is a deck that has 10 4s, 7 7s, 2 8s, and 6 10s, which totals to 165 with 25 cards in deck. That's my job. I stream full-time. I have a computer science degree, though. So when we run these simulations, given this deck with 9 mulligans, the average mulligan gain, you're going to gain 23 cards total with those 9 mulligans, with about 2.6 per mulligan. And the average value, you're going to draw every card in your deck, right? Also, we're treating it as we draw the entire 16 cards all at once, as it makes the numbers easier to look at. And it makes some of the things we're going to do later possible. So when we have 9 mulligans, you see the whole deck. So you get to basically stack your deck in whatever order you want. So your 4s are all on the bottom, and your expensive cards are in your hand. Now, it gets more interesting as we go down. You'll see that the average gain per mulligan actually stays constant, which was kind of surprising to me. I would have thought there were diminishing returns somewhere. But it's always 2.6. I'm not sure if there was a bug somewhere, because that doesn't make sense to me intuitively. But when I was looking it over, I couldn't see anything immediately obvious. Likeable Devil with the tier 1 sub. Thank you so much, man. If you want to audit my code, I have the Jupyter Notebook available on my GitHub here for any of you computer science nerds. So anyway, it ends up being, obviously with different mulligan numbers, you have the different average value left in your deck. So where we had a floor of 36 points left and a ceiling of 60 points left, when we know exactly how many mulligans we have, we can have a bit better of a range. Now, granted, this still isn't taking into account things like having bricks in our hand, like being forced to mulligan a card like Roach. It's not taking into account any other thinning that we're doing. This is just purely based on the mulligans. So when we have 4 mulligans, we're going to be left with 48. with 3 mulligans 51, with 2 mulligans 54, and with 1 mulligan 56. And there's this nice chart here that shows the frequency of various points that you're going to have. I did another one because I was curious how this would affect it if you had a more top-heavy deck. So over here we had a much more balanced distribution, right? We had 10 fours, 7 sevens, 2 eights, and 6 tens. When we look at this one, where we have 15 fours, 7 tens, and 11 and 2 12s, we get extremely similar numbers. The average gain per mulligan is still 2.6, and the average value left in deck is also similar as well. With 1 mulligan, we have 56. With 1 mulligan here, we had 56. The average value here, with 3 mulligans, it was 51. With 3 mulligans, it's 51. The only major difference is that you skew a little bit to the ends, right? So where this deck could never draw like a 93-point hand, this deck can draw 93-point hands. While you don't draw like very top end of this as often, you will hit the very top end more often here. So these really top-heavy decks do have an identical average even after mulligans. They just skew a little bit more. There'll be no quiz. This is all for if you guys are interested in the math. We're doing the math. Which is the best faction and leader. That depends entirely on what the card design is like. We don't know exactly what the card pool is going to be, and also it's going to depend on factors that this doesn't model properly. We're pretty much just talking about roughly how many points a mulligan is worth, and what the value of thinning is. So now that we've established this, we know for mulligans 4, 3, 2, and 1, how many points per card is going to be left over in the deck if we don't do any thinning. So we can further refine these numbers. Yeah, I think that's really weird. I feel like there has to be a bug. I don't know. It doesn't really affect what we're doing, so I didn't look too much into it, because I'm more worried about the points per card left over. So if we go into this, where we actually evaluate some cards, let's zoom out a little bit so we can see it all at one time. The first card I wanted to look at was Silver Witchers. So the whole package costs 18 provisions. You get 12 points out of them. And you thin 2 cards no matter which one you play, right? So if we're using our 6.6 value, which was the average, or the ceiling value, they're worth 7.2. If we assume that we're always going to have 4s left in our deck, they're still overcosted by 2. With 4 mulligans, they're overcosted by 4.8. Or undercosted, I guess you want to say. And with 1 mulligan, they're undercosted by 6.6. Now, again, this number is a little skewed because you only have 1 mulligan, and you have to worry about not having multiple witches in your hand. This is what it takes to be a top 100 player? Sort of. Especially when you want to build decks. So this kind of explains like how nutty witches are, right? Like, all the numbers are just insane. No matter like what, even on the minimum case, they're crazy. The only other cards that were like this were like really RNG cards like Daler and Soldier, or like the other obvious nutty card in Wild Hunt Rider, which even had a condition on it. Roach, on average, you're actually getting value. With 4 mulligans, you're losing a small amount of value, but it's still fine. And with 1 mulligan, you're getting 0.3. However, again, with the 1 mulligan, you still have to worry about getting Roach out of your hand, and there's a cost there. Like, every time you mulligan at 10, you're sort of losing a few points, because you're expecting to mulligan a 4 and gain this 2.6 points we talked about before. So we go into the more expensive tutors, and these are all kind of bad. However, again, I guess not again, this is the first time we've mentioned this. These get better because we're pooling individual cards, and if you have cards that are overcosted, like for instance ADC in a Hensel deck, where you need access to Curse Knight, and having access to Curse Knight is pretty much the only thing that matters, you can very easily justify losing these 3 points in order to gain the synergy. Same idea with Marching Orders, and Royal Decrees, obviously the same thing, as it's a tutor for any card in your deck. Where can you find this file? I guess I can do this. Shareable link. I know what the link can view. If you guys want to look at my look at the spreadsheet, here it is. I am using a lot of references, so should be easy to understand where all my numbers are coming from. Prince Willem is a really interesting one. Part of what, I don't know, I feel like this card might have been underplayed. I didn't like it when I played it because the randomness felt so bad. But if you can deal with the randomness, the value's pretty sick. Unicorn with Tibor changes the value immensely. Gonna be -2 because it's a spy. Oh, wait, you're right. Why did I think you got these points? Oh, this card's way worse. Never mind. Cool, this card still sucks. I'm glad he still sucks. Yeah, he doesn't add points to your guy. Cool. Yeah, Wild Hunt Rider is, again, kind of the stones. Foglet has a condition on it, but again is generally going to achieve pretty good value if you can get the Death Wish for free. Even if you're spending a point to get the Death Wish, you're getting value regardless. And since it's just a 4 in your deck, I think? No, it's a 5 in your deck. So you're getting 1.6 every time you mulligan it, roughly, by upgrading a 5 to a random card. It's not quite like Roach, where if you mulligan Roach, you're losing points according to the model. Or like if you're mulliganing a Witcher, you're only gaining 0.6 points, because it costs 6 naturally. I like the mango flavor. The mango flavor's pretty good. It's pretty good. Call of the Forest with Roach. I wasn't sure exactly how to model this. I ended up just adding the Roach and the Call of the Forest thinning together. So you get 6 points, 4 from the Roach, 2 from the Forest. And it costs 19 total provisions, 10 from the Roach and 9 from the Call. And it thins 2 because you're thinning the Roach and the card that Call makes. And this one's a little bit more inconclusive. It looks like it's just bad, unless you care about getting the Beast. Like, your best case is gaining 0.2. Your worst case is losing 5, and on average, you're still losing points regardless of how many mulligans you have. And this isn't even, like, mentioning the fact that you have to have a Roach in your deck that you have to mulligan sometimes. A bricked Call of the Forest, that kind of thing. When you Call of the Forest and actually have to shuffle something back in a round other than round 3, it doesn't actually contribute to your thinning either. So continuing with the theme, all of the bronze recruiters are really good. You're getting somewhat reasonable value out of Mahakam Volunteers. Daylord Soldier is the nuts if you can RNG it. You're getting anywhere between 4 and 6.6 points extra. So if you were to fairly cost this card, it would probably be like a 9. Maybe an 8. Just in terms of provisions, when you take into account the thinning. You can only lock units and not artifacts. Correct, yes. Impera Brigade, more nutty bronze tutors. So Daran sending 3 4s. I thought was pretty interesting. Even if you have no synergy with Daran, you're cheating on value almost every time. Daylor in hand was not bad. Exactly. Like, this is just pure extra value. You're literally cheating when you put Daylor and Soldier in your deck. It is so obscenely undercosted. It's competitive with the Silver Witchers. Actually, it's better than silver witches, right? Because you have to divide this by 2 if you want to get the per card. This is just like one card that thins itself with no other card next to it. Like all this other stuff takes up 2 slots. Does that change anything? Chance for an arena run? Probably not. I think we're gonna talk about this as much as people want to. And then I was hoping this would take a while, but maybe it won't. Maybe we'll end up going back to Gwent. Para Brigade. Oh, anyway, Darren. So even if you're not getting value out of like sending Phoenixes, sending Saris, sending all that stuff, you're still cheating on points just by getting 4s out of your deck. As long as you're doing it before you draw some cards. Every discard card is nuts? Yes, every discard card is nuts. Sort of. Burna's not insane. These get a lot better in Bran when you get to add the points. It's like you can look at Burna as a worst case -1 in a Bran deck. Heme Skull will always be worst case 0. But the new Coral. Which one's Coral? Discard a card, draw a card, whenever a special card is discarded, damage enemy by 2. It's gonna depend on how much value you get out of this, no? Also, because it's an order ability, you can't really evaluate it on the same scale. Because order abilities are inherently weaker than deploys. It's not really fair to include it. To 3 thin for free? Well, after a turn goes by. It doesn't get Zeal for free. Do these values change if you think the first 2 rounds don't matter and thus want low cost provisions in hand? Sort of. You could look at a 4 left in deck at the end of the game as a 4 played in a round where points don't matter as well, right? Because you've still gotten rid of that 4. So here we're seeing a 4 left in deck at the end of the game is worth somewhere between 0 and 2.6 points. Likely closer to one of these numbers. So yes, just being able to mulligan in round 3 to get 4s out is pretty valuable. Though we're mostly looking at points played over the course of the entire game. Because really points do sort of matter in every round. Though we get more to that when we start talking about the notes. Basically, mulligans are also really good. Yeah, as we talked about here, mulligans are worth about 2.6 per mulligan. Regardless of how many mulligans you have, according to the simulator. Which, if anyone can rationalize that to me, I would love to understand. Or at least point out the bug. I'm shocked there's no diminishing returns. Anyway, where were we? Yeah, Darren. So Darren's the nuts. This probably should have been in every Skellige deck, no matter what. And I think he was in every Skellige deck. The people were trying to like send golds, which is fine, but you don't even need to. This card is so undercosted for what he does. Can I send you that? Yeah. It's not really a formula. Wait a second. We gotta go here. It's like a whole simulator. German Shield Maiden. This one was a little bit harder to evaluate. I'm not sure whether I should call this 8 or if I should call it 7, because it has to be damaged to a Pula unit. I think it's also in order, isn't it? Oh no, just when it takes damage. So it depends whether damaging is free. I assumed that damaging your own unit was going to be free, so I called it 8. In which case it's competitive with Impera Brigade. Pretty much exactly the same numbers. Heme Skull, discarding a 4 versus discarding Skirmisher. You get better value when you discard a Skirmisher, obviously, because you get 2 free points. It is exactly 2 points better to be discarding a Skirmisher than a 4. Though, even if you have to discard a 4, and your leader is not Kingbrand, you're getting good thinning value. Pretty much across the board. The same is a little bit less true with Berna. But still pretty accurate. These numbers are all 2 better if your leader is Bran, and these numbers are all 1 better if your leader is Bran. No self-damage is free. Yeah, that's why I modeled it this way. Then we got Last Wish. Last Wish, if you banish a 4, you're using 13 points because you're losing the 4. You're getting no extra points. Costs thins 2 cards because it thins the card that you're pooling and the 13. And you're getting kind of mediocre value if you get rid of a 4. So the Last Wish is a little bit hard to justify. Even in the best case where you banish a 4, it's not great. And if you don't banish a 4, you're losing a pretty significant amount of value. Or at least a significant amount of potential value. Came here to say Homecoming sucks. That's not very productive of you. Wow. Having a 4 left in deck at the end of the game is worth a few extra points as well. About on the same par as like a Shield Maiden or Impera Brigade. Vernon Roche not living up to the name of Dijkstra. This card is much worse than DJ. Even if you're hitting 2 average cards, you're losing a good amount of points. I think even if he costs 0, what would it be if he cost 0? Numbers would look better. If you can set up a way to make him, I don't know, he's just kind of bad. He's so much worse than DJ. Yeah, if anyone's got questions about other cards I didn't include, I tried to include all of the easy ones for thinning. Adding the cost of the cards in deck to the total provision cost of the Vernon. Yes, because I'm crediting you points towards those cards. He's a 3, not a 4. You might be right. I might be thinking DJ. Yes, he is. Cool. Slightly better, still negative. Yeah, like it just offsets the numbers by 1. Everything is just like, it's pretty constant based. The only thing that we're multiplying by is the cards thinned. Everything else is just an additive constant. I think there's a bug because the average mulligan is 2.6. Because it's 2.6 regardless of how many mulligans you get. I assumed there'd be diminishing returns somewhere. But there wasn't. Link at the website with homecoming cards. Yes, I can. So yeah, that's that. And then I had some notes. I don't really want to like just read off the notes, but we mentioned most of these things, right? So we said 1 point, just 1 provision. It makes the models easier. It doesn't matter too much. And if we end up breaking the 1 point provision rule, the thinning towards becomes more important. So if you want to find like Ruhin or Morntart, which are like obviously undercosted, you just increase the number of provisions in the deck based on the expected value. So instead of having 165 provisions, you would estimate how many points overall are in the deck and use that as your provision count. And this, like if we say Morntart's worth an extra 15 points, just something ridiculous. We see before, Royal Decree will be worth about 5.4 negative. If we modify this to 180, it becomes 4.8 negative by adding the 15-point card. And everything goes up, right? Everything will be more valuable. All thinning. And it will knock some cards from negative to positive. Extremely late to the Gwent train, only got into the regular game like 2 weeks ago. Instantly got into the math and building decks. When I learned of Homecoming, I was annoyed that I just learned to abuse the old system, only to have it thrown out the window. However, the best part is trying to figure out how to abuse cards and combos. As an avid Gwent fan, looking forward to Homecoming and the changes. Yeah. The provisions make the math. I don't know, it kind of makes the math easier. Sort of. At least it makes modeling the math easier. Like, I wouldn't want to do something like this for live Gwent, even though it's probably possible. It would be so dependent on the deck. Yeah, before we had average value of bronze, silver, and gold, and those were pretty different depending on what deck you were playing. We're here to a much better estimation with the 1-to-1 provision cost. So next old went into 0 anyway. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Thinning was also mostly free, right? Where here you're somewhat paying for thinning most of the time. Like, even in the best case, you're paying 10 for 8 and you get a thinning. 18 for 12 with 2 thinning. Like, they clearly made it so that you had to pay to get thinning. There's no, like, free thinning in Reconnaissance anymore. But it feels like they never sat down and ran numbers, because all of these numbers are so different. I don't know. Like, I don't know how you arrive on 14.4 for Poet. Unless you're just, like, guessing. I don't know how you make cards like this so good compared to cards like this, when the condition on Rider is much easier than the condition on Foglet as well. Like the spell thinning cards are noob traps. It depends how much value you expect to get. So like with ADC, if you're pulling Cursed Knight, for example, and your whole deck is built around playing a lot of Cursed Knights, the synergy consistency that you get out of a card like ADC can be worth losing these couple of points, right? Same with the Royal Decree. Like, if you're playing a Consume deck, finding Ruhin can easily be worth, like, 30 to 40 points in round 3. So just having access to these cards is going to offset a couple of points theoretically lost. Probably be a ton of provision points. Oh yeah, I'm sure. Anyway, back to the notes. What else were we at? Oh, everything is obviously ignoring Mill. Mill throws all of this out the window. If you're playing a deck based around the models presented here, you will always lose to Mill. Not even close. I mentioned this earlier. The average card is the ceiling, and 4 is the minimum. Mulligan numbers try to hone that into more accurate numbers. You're on a 12 provision, 12 strength. It was better than Poet. Still gonna play Royal Decree, yes. Because I believe that in most of the decks that I'm playing Royal Decree in, I'm expecting to cheat on value somewhere else. Like I said earlier, with Ruhin and Consume, or even like Slizard and Consume. I've Royal Decreed for a lot of Slizards. Just because these cards are so undercosted. Whether cards are undercosted in the context of your deck, because you're so reliant on synergies, or cards just undercosted in general, Royal Decree is still going to be pretty easy to justify. Cards like Poet, not so much, because you don't have control over what cards you're drawing. Marching Orders is similarly kind of difficult, because you're going to pretty commonly have multiple 1s and 2s in your deck, where this is going to be a roll most of the time. Basically, if you aren't playing Usurper or Queen, there's not reason not to play Witchers. Yes, Witchers are the Stone Nuts, probably the best single cards in the game. Definitely the best thinning cards in the game aside from Daylor and Soldier. Which, I mean, Daylor and Soldier is kind of cheating, right? This is kind of fucked. Oh, this should be Italics. Wild Hunt Rider was also kind of nuts. Hey, Phillies, what's up? Uh, 12 Pro, 12 Strength would be better than Poet. Yes, because Poet's value is bad. However, if Poet was 10 provisions instead of 14, Poet would be cheating on costs most of the time. You're going to be nerfed for sure. Yeah, probably. It depends how much they want to emphasize locks. If they want to force you to have locks in your deck, they might keep cards like Ruhin around. Thinning is worth anywhere between 4 and 6.6 points per thinning. Is my solution consider that cards don't go back to the deck immediately? Yeah, it throws them in a separate... It just simply removes them from the hand. It doesn't put them back into the deck. It throws them in a separate zone for Mulligans so we can keep track of them. Anyway, what else? What else? So onto the Mulligans. We mentioned they obviously get more than 2.6. Shoveling Brixton back in your deck like Roach or Witchers. So Mulligans are usually more than 2.6. The 2.6 is just kind of a... I want to say it's a floor. It's basically a floor. Because of how simple the simulator is, you're almost always going to get more than 2.6. The 2.6 just accounts for getting rid of the cheapest card in your hand and upgrading it for a random card. If there's value in having specific cards in your deck more than them just not being in your hand, you're going to get more than 2.6. Positive there will be probably buff the tutors and make them auto-include. Maybe. I don't know, they seem to not want tutors. It seems like they intentionally made the tutors bad. Does the extra mulligan at 5 points from going first change my opinion on blue coin? It's... The blue coin situation's really, really complicated, right? So what the blue coin fix did is it minimized the worst case. It becomes a little bit harder to lose round 3 card advantage as blue, not only because it's a little bit harder to overtake the blue coin player because of the 5 free points, but also because even if they lose on even, they do guaranteed get another chance to fight for their card in round 2, as long as the pass was early enough. However, the blue coin player still doesn't have a way to force card advantage out of the red coin player. If the red coin player just plays 3 cards in round 1 and then passes, the blue coin player is under the pressure, or is stuck in the role of defender the entire game. So, like, it got better in the worst case where you can't dry pass, but now the blue coin player can't dry pass. And that's a pretty big downside. Oh, sure. Average cost minus minimum cost, that's not a coincidence. Yeah, but it's not always going to be able to mulligan a minimum. I guess thinking about it that way, it makes some amount of sense. I would still assume there'd be diminishing returns. Because at some point, before you take all of your mulligans, there's a chance that the average cost in your deck is no longer worth more than the average... Or no longer worth more than the worst card in your hand, because you've already taken so many mulligans. It already takes into account the diminishing returns. Does it? I'm pretty sure I'm just dividing by the number of mulligans I gave. That might not be. Number mulls. No, yeah. It's just the number of mulligans I gave. It's not by the number of mulligans that you actually take. Because it stops mulliganing if the average value of the deck is less than the minimum cost of a card in your hand. But I guess if that ever happens, you just hit... You've hit the ideal point anyway. Cards worth more than 50% cost for the model. Oh, right. So if you wanted to model the mulligans for like a specific deck. We'll talk about threatening the opponent's deck in a second. Like here, if you have Ruhin in your deck and you think Ruhin's worth more than 12, you can just like put this as like 18. You'll have more total provisions, but that's fine. Because your deck is effectively cheating on provisions anyway. It's going to depend on like how... Like, the numbers you get out of this is going to depend how accurate your estimations are. But that would be how you do it. High roller decks, the same average point potential. These decks are slightly more abusable on red coin for the same reason that you mentioned in chat earlier. Because you get to play your 4s in round 1 on red coin for free. Since the blue coin player can't dry pass to attempt to get card advantage anymore, the greedy deck can always play a few 4s, thinning cards for free in round 1 before passing. Now, the blue coin player, if they have 4s in their hand to play, can counteract that to effectively stay at parity. But because they have fewer of them, they're going to less reliably be able to answer the 4s with more 4s. Or they're going to have to take mulligans in order to find 4s to get out of their hand in round 1. It feels like high rolly decks benefit from the hand limit disproportionately. I'm not entirely sure, and I'm interested what chat thinks about that. I don't think it's a huge benefit. Red has to pay 5 provisions to win the round. Yeah. But they can just lose the round. Paying 5 provisions to get a card is generally going to be worth it. And also, once you start interacting with your opponent, things get a little bit weird as you make profitable trades that stop being about just like raw provisions. What's my solution to coin? I really don't know. I really don't know. It would be really cool if there was a way Okay, so points auction, realistically, is the only reasonable thing that makes sense to me. Because at least it takes into account matchups. Like, the problem with the 5 free points is, like in live Gwent right now, if you play against Reveal and you're on blue coin, the 5 points probably don't do much for you in terms of getting out of round 1 on even. Or getting out of round 1 with a default result. But in, like, an Alchemy Mirror, the 5 points could end up being a huge deal. Because the tempo is a little bit less important. Or a little bit less fast or powerful. So I would want it to somehow adjust based on matchup. And points auction is the way you would do it. Also, it would be cool if there was ever a way for blue coin to reasonably get card advantage out of round 1. Which there just isn't. If you're getting card advantage out of round 1 on blue coin, your opponent's misplaying. Your opponent has to overplay. Unless they value round control more than card advantage. Which is kind of a separate issue entirely. I think cards like Witchers get less valuable the later in the round they're played, since you don't benefit from the higher value in your deck as much. Kind of. We're modeling this mostly on based on how many points that you waste. We expect, on average, we waste 60 points because we don't have any thinning. So, not really, since we're still getting the points out of the Witchers for free. Instead of wasting the 8 points, we get to subtract the 8 from the average wasted. You lose some mulligan value, but we're not even taking that into account for the most part. None of these numbers take into account thinning. But yes, maybe. That wasn't really a question that I looked to answer. I think the only real way to fix a simultaneous card play, that's a pretty major shift. I don't know. Yeah, we're talking about, and this one's just the 2.6 appearing to be constant, which I guess makes some amount of sense. It just still feels weird to me. Yeah, I don't know, it just feels weird. I played Atlas Reactor? No. I've played other simultaneous turn games. I've played, like, Simulturn Risk. It's interesting, it's just a very, very different game. Can't wrap your head around the 2.6, something has to be going wrong. Yeah. Don't we drag conversation away from the questions I'm trying to answer, just trying to apply. Oh no, feel free to drag it away. I really don't have that much more content to talk about. I was hoping that there'd be more chat questions. And we could go on some tangents. Okay, wait, just quick sanity check, because I didn't actually do a sanity check, and I definitely should have. What if we just have 25 4s in our deck? Obviously, nothing should change, right? There should be no gain per mulligan. Okay, well, that was... sanity check passed. Yeah, I get that, Ed. I get that. But you're not always mulling a 4. Sometimes the lowest card in your hand is a 5 or a 6. It's the average, exactly. Actually, what if we get rid of the heuristic? Does that change anything? No. Huh. Yeah, but the thing is, you're still gaining as you take more mulligans as well. Oh, right. It doesn't work. The cards don't increase from mulligan. Yeah, exactly. And I just find that a bit of a surprising conclusion. Card index simultaneously increases. True. Yeah, the average value is 2.6 for any amount of moles. And the average gain always goes up. Obviously at 9, you optimize your deck entirely with every time. Anyway, speaking of thinning the opponent's deck, Traherne, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing wrong. I don't know, he's a 6, right? Traherne. This guy is a 4 for 6. So if you banish something less than 6, you're losing value based on the min value of thinning. And on average, you want to banish something at worst at least 9 to be positive. Ignoring full mill, obviously. The composition of the balance deck. That's 10 4s, 7 7s, 2 8s, and 6 10s. Do you think it's necessarily a bad thing? You can't get 100% consistency in your deck at Homecoming. You can't get 100% consistency on any deck in Gwent ever. If you're asking whether I think the reduced consistency is a good thing, I'm not totally sure. The greedy deck is this. Witchers are broken. Witchers are actually broken. For example, if you want to thin to 0, Skellige is pretty good at it. You have a gold that thins 2, a gold that thins 3, a bronze that thins 1, a leader that can thin up to 3. Make the Witchers 3 points each. Will they still be broken? I think they're still good if you do. Yeah, they're still well above curve. They're closer to on par with the bronze ones, but they're still pretty good. Game like GOT, we have a 60 card deck. I think it's weird people are so focused on that because they're used to Gwent. In Gwent, you have a lot of consistency, and people like that. That's one of the major appeals for people. Brand's order ability, the leader, is worth somewhere between 1 and 3.7 per charge, including the bonus point, when you're getting rid of a 4. That's not including the rest of his passive. So if you get to use Bran every round, you're getting somewhere between 3 and what, like 3 and 11 points, roughly. Ignoring the ability to discard skirmishers, and just assuming you're discarding random 4s. And then if you get extra points off the passive, Bran becomes even better. Like your cards that are already good, like Bran and Heme Skald. Skald gets an extra point across the board here. So these numbers look much more competitive. Not that they weren't before. And these numbers look better as well. See a case for Prince Willem if you're running a more top-heavy deck. Yeah, probably. I don't know, keep in mind that you're still basically paying 8 to thin 1. And generally, if you want to thin, you have better options, right? Like, you could play Silver Witchers, you could play your faction thinning bronzes. You could play Skellige. just Skellige. You could play a leader with more mulligans. Round 3 thinning's irrelevant. Yeah, but you always have to play rounds 1 and 2. You're always going to get to play at least 6 cards before round 3. You trade 8, because you're giving them 2. Yeah, this card's not terrible. Like, it's kind of competitive with the other... It's pretty competitive with the silver tutors, like ADC and Marching Orders. It's just that it's pure random. Because you're going to have a good number of golds in your deck. And at some point you're better off just like playing Decree or ADC or Marching Orders. Just for the reliability. Anyway, that was all the data and conclusions I had. If there is anything else in terms of questions, I will be happy to answer. Otherwise, I guess we could go back to Gwent. I was hoping this would take a little bit longer. But I like the suggestion of using provisions instead of mull to balance leaders. Yeah, sure. It feels better. It definitely feels better. I think I'd prefer if leaders were just a little bit more balanced. I don't know, it's weird having a guaranteed high provision card in your hand. That's sort of what leaders are. These conclusions, do I think that decks like these that work off general values of specific win conditions will have merit? Yeah, but generally you're going to want to combine the two ideas. Like, you're going to want to cheat on value in other ways, as well as try to cheat on value with your thinning. But yeah, I think most decks are going to want to cram as much free or positive EV thinning as they can. Like, Silver Witches are a no-brainer, right? Because you're literally getting free points when you include Silver Witches in your deck. Wild Hunt Rider. Probably a no-brainer. You're pretty much getting free points putting Wild Hunt Rider in your deck. Dalaran Soldier. If you got Reveal, you're playing Dalaran Soldier. Darran probably should have been seeing play in every Skellige deck. Even if you're not trying to do anything abusive with it. Off topic, do I think the charge archetype for Northern Realms has legs? No. I didn't see a single charge card that I liked the entire PTR. Some leader abilities are hard to make equal like before. Yeah, and you probably just have to rework those leaders. Provisions are not a great, like, they're not a perfect balancing mechanism. I don't know. I don't know. Were all homecoming cards revealed? Sort of, but a lot of them are going to be reworked. Like, if you want to look at the cards from the PTR, you can see all the PTR cards at this link. Mulligan limitations are pretty terrible too. Just that you're guaranteed to have your leader sort of incentivizes you already to play the highest provision leader you can. Simply because you don't have to thin towards it to find it. Like, instead of having, like, 165 total provisions, you're going to have some of these in your starting hand by default. So you'll be looking at, like, 150. So thinning becomes less important, and you're guaranteed more value in your opening hand. And that's my main concern. I don't know if it's a very major concern. Abusable cards like Routine or NR balance them out a bit. Some proficiency in leader abilities is not balanced rather than using them all. All should be standard. Yeah, I mean, I agree. These numbers, Nelf and Skellige have the edge in most cases. Yes. Skellige has the most thinning. The thing with these numbers, though, also, monsters are pretty nuts, too. Wild Hunt Rider is one of the best cards on the list. And monsters, in general, had the best other ways of cheating on provision costs. Like, Archospore was like a 7 or 8 for 4. All the Deathwish cards were super overtuned. Consume had probably one of the strongest engines in the game. But yeah, just based off this, those factions do seem to thin better than most. I think I'm curious if abusable cards like Routine Monsters or Curse Knight and then Armor don't have it. Maybe? I don't know. Wild Hunt Rider deafens you and your opponent. Let me figure out a provision cost for that. The provision cost was high enough that I stopped putting Wild Hunt Rider in my decks. I refused to play Wild Hunt Rider. I knew it was ridiculous. I refused to play it. The static sound triggered once, and I was out. My decks were good enough without it. Cost goes down as you get more death. Oh no. I plan on doing a card power rating after Homecoming release. Yeah, why not? We basically did that with the survey before. I don't know how long I'd want to play with the cards before doing that. Or whether I just want to give, like, first impressions. The first impression videos tend to be more popular, right? Impressions like a week later. People already have their own opinions, so they're less interested. The mute button to use. Yeah, I had a mute button too, but I always forgot to click it. So I ended up hearing at least a bit of the static. Hate the first impression video. Well, they get views, and most people like them. I could consider doing both. Just like a first impression, then a week down the line. It's a lot of time. I don't know, we'll see. My survey wasn't accurate. There weren't enough ones in NR. I gave a lot of ones in NR. Are you sure? A lot of one-ons. So many ones. Pretty sure you gave more. Still think the game is balanced around single player. That's why NR is weak. Monsters and Nilfgaard strong. What? Haven't we seen like the Thronebreaker abilities are nothing like the PTR abilities? I thought the card design was like totally separate. I think doing Trump, doing Homecoming, a review of the review, and the review of the review of the review. Yeah, I could do something like that. That could be interesting. It's like a quick and dirty first impressions, and then more in depth a little bit later. Just upgrade them. Right. Please do that. Okay, we'll see. We'll see. How'd everyone like the... Well, did anyone watch... Like, is anyone here for the survey? When I was filling that out? Because that would be pretty similar to, like, an in-depth review. Even though it was just 4 days down the road. It would just be a slightly more informed version of that. I'd probably have chat. I'd be listening to chat's feedback as I'm going through. Okay, it was fun. Okay. For like 20 minutes, yeah. But anyway, I thought the stat was really interesting. It gives a way to quantify fitting, which is something that I wanted throughout PTR. I just never bothered sitting down to do the numbers. Pretty much just confirms the suspicions I had. Like, riders are nuts, witches are nuts. Royal Decree is overcosted, but if you're cheating, it's fine. All numbers will go out the window after the 23rd. Not really. I mean, these numbers will. You have to rework the numbers, but really it's just plug in these constants. Everything updates manually from there, or automatically from there. Which time look to do the computer script? Oh, this? I did it in like 25 minutes, 30 minutes. I just made sure the numbers looked reasonable. This was pretty quick. It's like 15 minutes to get it working, and then I spent like a few more minutes making it look presentable. Threw in some graphs. I favorite this VOD and see if CDPR changed the numbers about anything listed here and see how it compares. Yeah, you can just save the spreadsheet too. Share. Like, I don't think I'm gonna... If I make adjustments, it'll probably be in a separate one. In PTR. There we go. Then we can have another one for when it's in live. I had more cues, but I can't think of anything. How to use and apply the data in ways I already haven't. Yeah, this took a long time to put together. I spent probably like 6 hours yesterday putting the spreadsheet together. Right, I started at like 10. I went until like 3. And I spent another couple hours doing the notes before I started streaming tonight. We can't change values. Yeah, you can make a copy. If you go File, Make a Copy. There it is. You can have a local copy that you can make adjustments to. So if you want to toy around with the numbers here, or you want to like see what happens when your deck is cheating on value in other ways and up this cost. I would recommend not messing with the calculated columns. This one and this one are referenced in other places. And those to this shouldn't need to be changed. But all the constants can be adjusted if you just want to experiment around. We trust my hard work. Whatever you want to do. If you want to post a Reddit thread, claim this as your own, be my guest. I've stopped caring about Reddit's opinions. To do it myself. I mean, it's Reddit. Do I really want those viewers? I'll get views when Homecoming comes around. It'll be fine. I might throw this like hour-long talk on YouTube. I don't know. Secret these texts for its advantage. Loyalist is trying to. I'm sure other people are gonna figure this out. This isn't anything complicated. What other questions were there? The value of mulligans when you have cards like Roach in the deck is something that I want to look into more. Because by having a 10 cost card you have to get rid of to get value out of at all, it sort of devalues the mulligan that we're looking at here, even though it's technically making your mulligan better. So, like, when you have a deck with a set of Witchers and Roach, how much is a mulligan worth then? And I could probably just, like, edit the simulator to spit out some numbers, but it's a little bit more work. And not work I really want to do on stream. Other questions? Perfectly timed loots. Wait, was there a loots? I didn't hear it. Did that work after the Homecoming release? Well, the nice thing about this is it's so easily, like, portable, right? Like, if the values change, I just change a couple of constants. And I just get the numbers for those new constants. It's not a ton of work if cards change slightly. Oh, I don't have my loots dashboard up. That's why. You know I was forgetting something. So the one that popped up was watching the Homecoming VODs when you talked about doing this for you. Oh yeah, Loots is great. Loots is great. It gets much better when I have more viewers, but it still does something. Every little bit's appreciated. one pop up yet? It says it's waiting. Get more Reddit viewers? I don't know. I don't know. Do I really want that kind of toxicity in my chat? Reddit's the best source of info of Gwent. No, that's probably Shinmiri's stream, honestly. After Shinmiri's stream, it's probably GwentDB. And after GwentDB... yeah, it might be Reddit. Oh, you can see a stream 24-hour and get all the info. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It depends what kind of information you want, right? If you just want news, then sure, Reddit's great. But if you want any kind of like information about gameplay, how to play Gwent better, Reddit is probably one of the worst places to go. I used to have segments before Reddit. For news? Really? I actually never use their website for pretty much anything. I'm curious now. Oh, I can probably just look at this here. Oh yeah. Well, I got articles. Deck building and archetypes in Gwent Homecoming. Oh, it's a video. I didn't really want to watch a video. It doesn't look like we have like actual news here. I get visual content so I don't have to read. But I can read faster than I can watch a video. I really don't want to play Gwent. I think we're just gonna like... I didn't do the neutral cards on stream. We can just talk about the neutral cards. Just like go through and do basically the survey without doing the survey. Does anyone want to do that?